Europe is falling apart under a migrant crisis that's out of control. The Mediterranean became a graveyard again, with 2,500 people dying and hundreds of thousands reaching southern Europe. Italy is struggling, declaring a state of emergency as the crisis hits its shores. Greece, Hungary, and Germany face similar problems, with rising tensions and societies close to breaking. The numbers are shocking. The resources are running out, and the far right is growing. Let's dive into it with Politalysis.
Now, Italy's Prime Minister has warned Europe will be overwhelmed by migration unless the EU finds solutions.
And new conflicts on the EU's doorstep and around the world have led to increasing numbers of people seeking refuge in the bloc.
Just a year went by and the Mediterranean became a deadly crossing again for people seeking a better life. Nearly 190,000 migrants have arrived in southern Europe, overwhelming places like Lampedusa, Italy. Italy's response? A state of emergency. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has allocated over $50 million to tackle the influx, but the cost is more than just financial. It's societal, political, and human. Italy's not alone in this struggle. Greece, Hungary, and even Germany are facing challenges that could reshape their societies. Greece has seen its islands turned into holding centers, while Hungary's strict anti-immigration stance has polarized the EU further. In Germany, the rise of the Alternative for Germany party shows how public sentiment is shifting. In a country that once opened its doors wide, the mood is changing fast. The numbers tell part of the story. In 2023, over 250,000 asylum applications were filed across Europe, a big rise from previous years. Italy alone saw a 30% increase in arrivals compared to 2022, pushing its public services to the brink. Hungary, a vocal opponent of the EU's migration policies, has refused to comply with relocation quotas, leading to tension within the EU. The Hungarian government has built barriers, not just physical, but also ideological, refusing to accept what it calls forced multiculturalism. The EU's response has been fragmented at best. A new migration pact aims to redistribute asylum seekers more equally, but not everyone's on board. Hungary and Poland, in particular, have rejected mandatory relocations, saying they undermine national sovereignty. Meanwhile, Ursula von der Leyen calls it a game changer. But on the ground, the crisis seems far from managed. For Italy, Greece, and others on the front lines, EU solidarity feels like an empty promise. In the Brexit debate, immigration was painted as the root cause of Britain's economic struggles, a scapegoat that deflected blame from the years of government neglect and mismanagement. Brexit supporters claimed that immigrants were stealing jobs, dragging down wages, and overwhelming public services, despite mounting evidence that immigrants filled crucial labor gaps and contributed significantly to the economy. This narrative tapped into fears, redirecting anger from real issues like austerity cuts and stagnant wages toward innocent people simply seeking a better life. By blaming immigrants, pro-Brexit leaders fueled resentment and oversimplifies Britain's challenges, manipulating public opinion for political gain and setting the stage for Brexit as a solution to problems immigrants never caused. Public sentiment across Europe is growing more hostile. In France, Marine Le Pen's national rally is gaining support, using fears that migrants are straining resources and threatening cultural identity. In Italy, Meloni's government has cut back on migrant rescue operations, arguing that it's time Europe protects its borders rather than opening them. The economic impact is undeniable. Countries like Germany, Italy, and Greece have seen their public services stretched thin. In Italy, unemployment among migrants is more than double the national average, creating economic ghettos and fueling resentment. The rise of informal settlements, or ghettos, around major cities is leading to a divided society, one where integration is a distant dream. In Germany, recent studies show that the per capita GDP has been impacted by increased public spending on social services for refugees, sparking debate over whether the nation can afford such generosity. And it's not just the economy. Crime statistics are being used as political weapons. In Sweden, a country once seen as a haven for refugees, crime rates have been politicized to paint migrants as criminals. Far-right parties across Europe are using these statistics, regardless of their accuracy, to create fear and justify stricter immigration controls. In Hungary, Viktor Orban has used the crisis to bolster his anti-EU rhetoric, positioning himself as a defender of European Christianity against what he calls an invasion. Europe seems to be caught up in a growing wave of far-right attitudes. You can see it happening in politics all over the world. In Italy, for example, Giorgia Meloni, the prime minister, is making big moves with her Brothers of Italy party. It sounds a lot like what Viktor Orban's been pushing over in Hungary, especially when it comes to migrants. Meloni's idea? She wants to process migrants in Albania, but not everyone's on board. Courts are questioning if it's even right to call Albania a safe place for asylum seekers. Meanwhile, France is dealing with its own version of this shift. Marine Le Pen and her National Rally Party keep talking about how migrants supposedly threaten French identity. They gained a lot of traction recently, even making some big wins in the European Parliament elections, securing 23.3% of the vote. This has put President Emmanuel Macron in a pretty tough spot and made his position look weaker than before. The rise of far-right sentiment isn't just happening in Italy or France. It's rippling across the entire continent. The recent European Parliament elections showed just how strong these feelings have gotten, with far-right parties seeing a boost almost everywhere. In total, far-right parties gained around 25% of the seats, and it doesn't look like they're planning to stop there. This could seriously change EU policies down the line, as people in power start worrying about how to handle migration and where to put up stricter borders. Germany is another hot spot where things are heating up. The far-right Alternative for Germany party has been gaining popularity, reaching up to 22% in some polls. Not without controversy, though. There have even been some arrests lately, showing that some of their more extreme members might be involved in illegal plots. Over in the Netherlands, similar far-right vibes are also on the rise. Attacks like the one on Israel soccer fans have added fuel to the fire, with people demanding even tighter immigration rules. Across Europe, these far-right groups are making waves by tapping into fears around migration. The conversation is less about managing migration properly and more about shutting down borders and keeping newcomers out. With these parties gaining more power, they're starting to shape decisions not only in their own countries, but also on a European Union level. The future of Europe's policies seems to be changing as these voices grow louder, and it's pretty clear that the migrant crisis is a huge part of the reason why. But what about the migrants themselves? The human story often gets lost in the politics. These are people fleeing war, persecution, and poverty, people who see Europe as their only hope. The EU has agreements with countries like Turkey and Libya to curb migrant flows, but these deals have been criticized for human rights abuses. Tunisia, a recent partner in EU migration control, has already rejected funds from Brussels, refusing to act as Europe's border guard. The situation's complex, and the solutions are far from clear. The crisis is also leading to diplomatic shifts. Italy has called for normalizing relations with Syria, hoping to facilitate deportations, a move that's drawn heavy criticism. Critics say that sending refugees back to a war-torn country is a violation of international laws. But for Meloni's government, it's a matter of national security. The EU's reliance on third-party agreements to manage migration is under scrutiny, as these deals often come at the cost of ethical considerations. The future looks uncertain. Experts predict that the influx will continue, driven by instability in Africa and the Middle East. Europe is likely to receive up to 1 million new asylum applications in 2024 alone. The question is, how will Europe respond? Will it continue to fragment, with each country going its own way, or will there be a unified approach that respects both human rights and national sovereignty? The far right's rise is already having real effects. Policies are becoming harsher, borders more fortified, and the language around migration more divisive. In France, recent proposals include restricting access to public services for undocumented migrants. In Germany, the AfD's pushing for stricter asylum criteria, arguing that only those fleeing direct persecution should be considered. Across Europe, the narrative is changing, and with it, the policies that define the continent's response to this crisis. Europe is in a tight spot, teetering on the edge of chaos. The migrant crisis is spiraling out of control, and everyone's feeling the heat. We've got thousands of people on the move, looking for safety and a new life. But where should they go? And how does Europe handle it without completely falling apart? Let's look at how some other places have managed things like this. Not perfect, but they've tried some methods that might help Europe out of this mess. First up, Australia. Their plan? Keep people away from their shores altogether. They set up centers in tiny places like Nauru and Papua New Guinea, far away from the mainland. If you tried to reach Australia by boat, they'd send you to one of these places instead. It's like, hey, try to get here and we'll put you somewhere else. It did reduce the number of boats, but let's be real, those centers were not great. People there complained about terrible conditions, and Australia got a lot of heat from human rights groups. It worked in one way, fewer boats, but at what cost? Then there's Canada. They decided to be the nice guy, opening doors in a controlled way. They mainly took in refugees referred by the United Nations and tried to make them feel at home. The Canadian government provided all sorts of support, help with language, finding a place to live, jobs, the works. This approach was less about keeping people out and more about making sure they could start fresh and contribute. It's a softer approach, but it's also a huge commitment that costs money and takes time. And then there's Turkey. This country took in almost 4 million people, mostly from Syria. That's a massive number for any country, but Turkey has done it with the help of deals with the European Union and international money coming in. Turkey's been the stopgap, a kind of holding ground for Europe. And it's shown that when everyone chips in, a heavy load can be managed. Still, it's far from perfect. Turkey's got its own issues with keeping all these people fed, sheltered, and safe. The thing is, Europe's plan so far is all over the place. They came up with something called the Pact on Migration and Asylum in 2024, hoping to sort out a plan for everyone to share the burden. Some countries are on board, others not so much. Italy recently tried to send migrants to Albania to get processed there, but that plan hit a lot of legal roadblocks. It's not easy to figure out. Everyone's trying to balance their own interests, and the European Union doesn't always agree on what's best. This is a story that's far from over. The migrant crisis is reshaping Europe, and the outcome is anything but certain. Stay tuned as we continue to bring you the latest on this unfolding situation. If you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth coverage on the issues that matter. Should Europe tighten its borders, or should it strive for a more unified and compassionate approach? Let us know in the comments below.